Good morning, everyone. My name is Minna Talas Sarafi. I'm a program specialist at the Basic Sciences, Research, Innovation, and Engineering section under the Natural Sciences sector of UNESCO, and I'm honored to be your moderator today. Being part of UNESCO, the UN agency with an S in its name and a mandate in science, and having previously been a scientist in North Africa, this session is special for me. It will highlight the vital role of voice of science in addressing global challenges and preserving our planet. Today, we have the honor of hearing from our speakers about their thoughts on the importance of the scientific discourse or the voice of science. Scientific discourse takes many forms, including public science communications like talks, for example, policy recommendations, publishing research papers, and more. Additionally, data analysis and reporting findings play a crucial role in identifying gaps and guiding informed decision-making. However, maintaining credibility is essential to ensure that scientific knowledge is both trusted and impactful. Today, we gather to discuss with our speakers how their organizations are engaging in scientific discourse to develop and implement strategies for environmental protection while maintaining credibility and fighting misinformation. First, let me introduce our speakers. Dr. Lydia Brito is currently the Assistant Director General for Natural Sciences at UNESCO. She's a forest engineer with a master's and PhD in forest and wood science from Colorado State University in the USA. She has held several senior positions in Mozambique, including serving as the Minister for Higher Education, Science, and Technology. She first joined UNESCO as Director for Science Policy and Sustainable Development, and then she was appointed UNESCO Regional Director for Sciences in Latin America and the Caribbean region. Later, she became Director of UNESCO Multi-Sectoral Regional Office for Southern Africa. Okay. Dr. Anne Larry-Goudry is the Executive Secretary of EPIS, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, established by governments in 2012. She has a PhD in plant ecology, and she spent the first part of her career as a research scientist, working on the impact of climate change on various ecosystems across several continents. She has dedicated the past 10 years or more to establish EBIS in order to increase the use of science to inform decision-making on nature and its contributions. Now we have online Ms. Matilda De Silva, who is the founder and CEO of the Ocean Purpose Project, a Singapore-based social enterprise focused on ocean conservation and reducing plastic pollution. She was formerly a TV producer, radio DJ, and a head of community for MediaCorp and StarHub. Matilda spearheads initiatives like plastic-to-fuel technology, seaweed bioremediation, and bioplastic development to combat marine pollution and promote the blue economy. So, this will be an interactive session. So we want to leave this room with action plans, recommendations, and new ideas. So first, I will ask our speakers some key questions, and then we open the floor for discussions, and we would like to get you all engaged. So, Dr. Brito, I'll start with you. UNESCO uniquely integrates the diverse disciplines of science with education, culture, and policymaking through its programs and initiatives. It also positions itself as a key advocate for open science through its 2021 recommendation. UNESCO has indeed the power to produce knowledge, amplify the voice of science, and promote awareness on critical global issues. Moreover, as the lead agency for the International Decade of Sciences for Sustainable Development, UNESCO focuses on citizen science and empowering the global community through scientific literacy. So given UNESCO's unique role in scientific discourse, how does UNESCO utilize its expertise and influence to tackle global challenges, including Earth preservation, biodiversity conservation, and climate change mitigation? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mena, and Anne, very nice to see you. Me and Anne, we used to be very close, and then we lost track of each other. And we are very happy I'm very honored to share the panel with Anne, and thank you very much for being with us today, and welcome to UNESCO. It's always a great pleasure to receive all of you here. Indeed, one of the advantages, I would say, of UNESCO is precisely the fact that our mandate, it's really encompassing all the different drivers that can build a better world, I would say, because it's people-centered, it's planet-centered, and it's about education, it's about the sciences, it's about culture, communication, And I think this multi-perspective approach that we have in our programs are probably one of our strengths, because when we work on themes such as water management, sustainable water management, or protection and conservation of biodiversity, geoheritage, we always bring the component of education to the communities, to the young people that are, in particular in our sites, our UNESCO designated sites, but also the importance of cultural identity and the link between culture and the environment. And we do believe that it's not only about biodiversity conservation, but it's also how do you create an harmonious relationship between the people and the environment where they live, and how that harmonious relationship can really sustain the social growth, the inclusion, and development in a way that is benefit to all. And you mentioned already several tools, the Open Science Recommendation, but also the Decade of Sciences for Sustainable Development, where we believe that we need a better science literacy in our societies. We need to have all of us being able to understand what science is saying and bringing forward, but at the same time contributing to that knowledge, to the creation of that knowledge. So it's not just a passive relationship with the creation of scientific knowledge, but is really an active process of creating the knowledge that we need in order to tackle the global challenge that we have today and we will have tomorrow. And therefore, citizen science, for example, it's an important approach that we use when we do research related to, in this particular case, climate change or earth protection or soil protection. We have a new initiative on soils, and of course in our sites. So briefly, maybe just to say that one of the good contribution of UNESCO, I would say that is our sites. We have several types of UNESCO designated sites. We have what we call our biosphere reserves. We have more than 700 reserves around the world in all climate zones and covering the major ecosystems in Earth. We have our geoparks that are also related to geoheritage, but also how Earth developed and is still developing, and therefore you study the changes that we can see in our planet. And then, of course, we have a very unique designation, UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and we have several sites that are nature-based. So they are what we call natural World Heritage Sites because they have a unique value in terms of the ecosystems in Earth. If we put all of them together, we have more than 2,000 sites around the world. And therefore, they are centers for change because these communities are absolutely committed to maintain the unique value of these territories. We have management plans, we have communities that live there, and therefore it's a very wonderful way to build trust in science, to promote more citizen science, and really to connect knowledge, local knowledge systems, indigenous knowledge systems with the scientific knowledge systems, because that's also part of our open science recommendation, is to say all knowledge systems should work together, should build together the solutions we need. And then we have a new type of UNESCO designated sites. We call them the eco-hydrology sites, where we use nature-based solutions to improve water quality, to improve water retention, to protect groundwater, surface water, based again in restoration of main water-related ecosystems. And we have several sites around the world. It's a new program that is growing very, very fast. And finally, we promote the science we need. So We work with basic sciences, with social sciences, and in a holistic way, again, to make sure that, the scientific community is involved and is a key actor in finding solutions. So building trust in science and bringing science to decision-making, it's not a one-time kind of thing. It's really when you can involve all the actors, from the scientific community, from the local communities, from governments, from companies, and the private sector, then we can start building that trust in science, because we are all committed to produce the knowledge we need and to use that knowledge to take decisions. So I stop here, Mena. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Anne, EPIS play an important role in assessing biodiversity and ecosystems. It additionally supports decision-making by promoting new studies and supporting capacity-building initiatives. It actively promotes scientific discourse by engaging a diverse array of stakeholders, including scientists, indigenous knowledge holders, experts, and policymakers. This inclusive approach ensures that multiple perspectives are integrated into its assessment, enriching the understanding of biodiversity challenges. Given EBIS' commitment to fostering inclusive scientific discourse, could you elaborate on the specific mechanisms and initiatives the organization employs to enhance the quality and impact of its biodiversity assessment?
Thank you very much. Greetings to everyone, and it's also a pleasure to share the podium with Lydia and also with Matilda online. So the question is about how IBES ensures the high quality and the impact of its work. So perhaps by way of background, I'll just say a few words about IBES itself. Some of you may not know what it stands for and what it does. So it is the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, and it is an intergovernmental mechanism. The governments are members. There are close to 150 governments who are members, and IBES sits at the interface between science and policy. And so what it does, its mission is to strengthen this interface, to deliver scientific information to inform decision-making. So how do we fulfill this mission? How do we do this? Those who are familiar with the IPCC will know that IBES very much compares in terms of all of its processes and also its products. And IPCC is GIEC in French, so that to make sure that everyone is with me here. And so IBES produces scientific assessments of existing knowledge of the thousands of scientific publications in the literature. It also is based on indigenous and local knowledge as well. And the assessments are produced by scientists around the world sitting in their institutions. And therefore, as you can imagine, it is very important to ensure the scientific quality of the report. So how do we ensure quality first? So quality, one of the key first priorities is, of course, to try and select the best scientists around the world, and there are procedures in IBES to do that. Of course, we issue calls, and then we ask for CVs, and we then have a committee that looks at these CVs. But aside from that, it's also important to have a diverse group of scientists as well, and so we are committed to regional balance, we are committed to gender balance. Perhaps we come back to that a little bit later, because science is neutral, of course, but it is still very important to have a multiplicity of background in terms of the authors who participate and produce all of these reports. And then, of course, we have the very important peer review process. If you are involved in science, you will also know how important peer review is. So it's at various moments in the production of an assessment, which typically takes 3 to 4 years. There will be various drafts, and we then invite the scientific community out there to register and then to review some of the chapters, or later on the summary for policymakers. And that's very key, because that's a moment where you will be told that perhaps the report is missing an important body of knowledge or should reanalyze some data or etc. So peer review is key for quality. And then, of course, there are other aspects such as documenting everything. It's a matter of transparency, but also, I believe, of quality. We have a data management policy for that, a conflict of interest policy, many other tools. So we are really very much aware of the importance, especially in the times we live in, to really be inattackable in terms of the quality. And then to speak a little bit about the impact, you asked me to talk also a little bit about that. And so in order to have impact, you need to have policy relevance, of course, and that means to engage your users from the very beginning. So, of course, IPBES in itself is such a mechanism that is owned by its end users, the government, and it also involves many other different kinds of stakeholders. And all of the work that IPBES does is demand-driven and is requested by all of these governments, but also by various conventions. So the Convention on Biological Diversity, for example, through decisions of its scope, can request IPBES to undertake new work, and it does so. So, for example, we recently published a report on invasive alien species and their control. That was one of those reports that had been requested by the Convention on Biological Diversity. So users can propose topics. They will then also be giving the scientists in charge of producing the report a scoping report, which is like a roadmap. It lists all of the questions that should be addressed, and then, of course, those would be policy relevant since they are produced by the users and approved by them. I've already mentioned the diversity of knowledge systems, which is very key. And that's also very important because you may not know, but there is 500 million of people in the world who are indigenous, who belongs to indigenous people and local communities. And UNESCO does a lot of work with these communities, and therefore their very precious knowledge is also important in order to help with the impact also for these communities. I could go on and on. I will not do that. We also have capacity building dialogues. Once our assessments are completed, we go to various communities with experts, with users, with practitioners, so that they then think about how to apply our key messages from our summary for policymakers to their local circumstances, etc. And then we try to keep track of our impact. We have assembled a publicly available global databases. We call it TRAC. We're not very imaginative. And there we now have, in about 10 years, it's not exhaustive at all, but we have about 600 examples, documented examples of how IPBES reports have been used in national legislations, for example, about biodiversity at the global level, biodiversity of users. So those are some thoughts regarding quality and impact.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And now we move to Ms. Matilda de Silva. Are you online?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Bonjour.
Yeah. Okay, so I would like to ask you a question. So the Ocean Purpose Project is at the forefront of ocean conservation, working to reduce plastic pollution by transforming ocean plastics into hydrogen. Through collaborations with low-income communities, indigenous groups, and scientists, the Ocean Purpose Project is driving innovation and inclusive sustainability strategies. So given its commitment to scientific innovation and community collaboration, how does Ocean Purpose Project contribute to scientific discourse, using its strength in bringing scientists, local communities, and policymakers together?
Thank you so much for the question. And I also wanted to give thanks to the Earth University as well as UNESCO. Thank you for inviting me to share my story from Pasir-Ris, which is the beach town that I live in Singapore, in the northeast of Singapore, all the way to Paris. I think before I can answer this question in terms of how do we actually bring the scientific community as well as traditional fish farmers or other aspects of the coastal community together. It might be better if I give you an explanation of why Ocean Purpose Project began. In fact, if you Google my name, you're probably going to find a lot of YouTubes of me on Singapore Idol that come up. And this is again, the part that is maybe a bit confusing. Like, what is this Singapore Idol or this TV producer? What is she doing with ocean conservation? So in 2015, when I was paddling in a dragon boat race in the sea, representing my country in a race in the Philippines, I was exposed to polluted water. And I didn't know it at the time. And just 3 days of exposure made me extremely sick. From that, I've developed a host of skin issues, speech issues, even issues with mobility. And this is again where it's taken a long time for me to understand that, when it comes to ocean pollution, it's not just a plastic issue. It's a chemicals issue, it's oil spill, it's multiple other kinds of things like algae bloom, bacteria bloom. There's so many different components of what's making up ocean pollution. And the thing that brings my unique perspective to the story is I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer, but I am someone whose life has been completely derailed by exposure to ocean pollution. With my background in media, I didn't want to just go off and become a content creator. I think we have enough people making TikToks and fancy Instagram posts about why our oceans are polluted. I really wanted to scratch beneath the surface and understand systemic issues as to why ocean pollution persists, especially in Southeast Asia. Why is this such a problem that is affecting our region, where Asia is responsible for such a huge percentage of global plastic pollution, and I don't even want to know how much of chemical pollution we are responsible for. And so I quit my job at a bank and decided to start Ocean Purpose Project, an NGO and a social enterprise, in 2020. And I think all of us in this room know what happened in 2020. I have paid a lot of money to try and forget what happened in 2020. I can say that when we began, the mission was really to say, how can we create little OPPs or ocean purpose projects to prototype solutions around the multiple types of ocean pollution? So for example, coming back to the question, how do we create a solution for all forms of mixed plastic waste? So for example, I just conducted a student education session yesterday with 40 students, where they were art students who had really struggled with this issue of how to create a theater production or a visual arts production about plastic pollution, right? The story has been told so many times. So I said, okay, we are not going to waste time on feelings and emotions. Let's deep dive into the chemical structures of the 7 different types of plastics. Let's understand how different chemical additives are added to create those 7 types of plastics. Let's also understand why Ocean Purpose Project is working on things like plastic to hydrogen. For example, if we were able to take mixed plastics, even contaminated plastics, PET, PVC, PE, PP, PS, we actually are able to mix those plastics, things that cannot be mechanically recycled, and convert that into hydrogen. Now, the reason why Ocean Purpose Project is very focused on bringing not just the scientific community among academia together, we're very focused on bringing the scientific community among industry to answer key questions on how do we really balance this topic of pollution, profit, and purpose, and make that combine to be fit for purpose. So that's where, with a project like Plastic to Hydrogen, it's really mapping out all of the challenge points around launching such a project, and also understanding how we can actually, get different yields based on the different combinations of plastics. The other thing that we work on is really very close to my heart. In fact, every time I look in the mirror, I'm wearing heavy makeup now, but I actually have patches of white on my face because of that exposure to polluted water. So the work that we're doing on seaweed bioremediation, using the 20 species of seaweeds, green, red, and brown, that grow naturally, native species, in my town, in my coastal town. And we are like the first to actually launch such a project. It was so difficult for us to even find papers about this from local universities in Singapore because there's such a limited amount of information on this. But literally going off and moving in this space in citizen science and pulling together industrial knowledge from the maritime sector, for example, around ballast water, of course, from universities all over the world, and of course, from our fellow partners in UNESCO, we were able to tweak our project to mobilize smallholder farms that are able to use seaweed and mussels to remove high amounts of nitrogen, nitrates, nitrites, and phosphorus, as well as ammonia from our seabed, from our seas and passaries. And this is again where it's so interesting because the materials from these nature-based solutions, of course, we cannot eat that seaweed and mussels. We turn it into biofertilizers, biofuels, even bioplastics. And that's really where, the role of citizen science, especially with the advent of AI, is about being able to take the wealth of knowledge that's out there and make it operational success. Operationalize it, understand the challenges, map that, and pull together the community stakeholders that are ready to do projects that are not just surface level, shaking hand with minister. I mean, everybody can do this, right? We need to move beyond that into little prototyping projects, little citizen science projects, school projects that are able to answer key questions that coastal communities are facing. So that's really been what we've been working on at Ocean Purpose Project. That's also, the way that we bring the scientific community in. That's also the way that we bring the industrial community into our projects. And of course, schools and other members of the community.
Thank you so much. So now I would like to hear from all speakers. So what is your organization's current action plan and the next steps to advance global biodiversity conservation, and how can different stakeholders be encouraged to join these efforts? Who wants to start? Lydia.
Thank you very much again. And I think Matilda mentioned quite a few things that we are already doing. But maybe very briefly, and you are in UNESCO, so you will see it, that outside in our fences, we have an exhibition on glaciers, for example. And as you know, 2025 is the International Year of Glacier Preservation. And we will be launching the decade of cryosphere science in June in the World Ocean Conference in Nice, because we will have 10 years of studying the cryosphere and trying to understand better what is happening with these ecosystems. So one way that we work, it's clearly by raising the issues and bringing that not only to the scientific community and governments, but to the public in general. And that's why you see the pictures in our fences, because this is a very touristic area in Paris. We are very fortunate to be here, so we use our fences also to pass messages that go beyond to the people that live in Paris, but really to everyone that visits Paris and comes to see UNESCO headquarters as part of a touristic experience in this beautiful town. We also promote a lot of scientific cooperation. And again, how to bring science to decision making, in particular to global agreements. So next week we will have on Thursday and Friday, we will have the celebration of the International Year of Glaciers. We will be launching our water development assessment that is now related to mountains and ice and glaciers, as what we call the water towers of the world. So we will have an assessment of the situation of glaciers and the impact of their melting and the rate they are melting in water supply in the different parts of the world. And the week after, we will have then the Science Diplomacy Ministerial Conference, because we believe that science now, more than ever, needs to be at the global agenda and be part of the discussions that governments have when they define their global agreements related to climate change, to biodiversity, to conservation, to development, to emerging technologies. If you don't have the sciences informing these diplomatic efforts of coming up with global agreements, then you will have agreements that will not have impact and will not change anything. So therefore, it's another area, another thing that we do is to bring science and diplomats and ministers together to say, what can we do better? What kind of scientific information do you need when you are taking global decisions, you know, as in many areas that we have been discussed. The other part, and maybe just stopping there, we launched in Cali during the COP16 an important initiative that we call the 100 Sites of Transformation. And basically what we are doing with this initiative is showing that people in nature live together and can strive together. You don't have to choose one or other. It's really about working together and being together and being part of the same whole. So we are using our UNESCO designated sites that have already contributed to the indicators that are part of the Comune Montreal framework and the CBD, showing that with our sites we are already responding to the 23 targets that are under the framework, and more, these sites are also part of other effective conservation activities, because these sites have core areas that are full conservation, but then they have what we call the transition areas, where you have the relationship between humans and nature, and is there where the sustainable development models and solutions come about. And I think this is a very important initiative that we launched last year during COP16 on biodiversity, but that we hope this year with our World Congress in China, where we will have all our reserves present, our 700 plus biosphere reserves present in the Congress, where we can indeed discuss both with the ministers that will be there and the managers of the sites and the communities that represent these sites, how we can make sure that we bring scientific cooperation among sites, among governments, to learn from each other and really to push a sustainable agenda in a much stronger way. And then finally, under the Science Decade, as you know, it's not only about bringing science to the decision making, to the society as a driver for sustainable development, but it's about also reflecting how do we do science nowadays, and are we doing the science that we need, and are we doing the science with the people that can indeed transform the way we do science and we create scientific knowledge. So one of the biggest areas that we are now embarking with partners is to reflect on this social contract with science, because it has changed. Before we thought, you know, public funding goes to scientific organizations, they are self-regulatory, they have ethics, and they do science for good, and therefore that knowledge, it's available to society and to people to solve their issues. The truth is we have much less public investment in science today. Most of the big science now, and in particular when they go to emerging fields of science, it's really the private sector, the big player in investing in this new knowledge that is needed to develop the new technologies. And therefore, we need to bring all these stakeholders together. And we need to reflect how can we still defend the right to science that has two pillars that are very important for us. The first one, all of us should benefit from scientific knowledge, but also all of us should participate in the creation of knowledge for the good of humanity. So these are some insights. I hope I respond to your question.
And would you like to add?
Sure. Yes. So about plans for IBES moving forwards with respect to biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. Of course, we have a plan. We call it the work program of IBES up to 2030. And I'll just give you some of the highlights. Don't know if you remember back in 2019 when IBES released its first global assessment of biodiversity and ecosystem services. I always get a little bit emotional coming back to UNESCO because this is where it was approved by 150 governments. You may remember one of its headlines, which is the 1 million species of plant and animal threatened with extinction out of a total of about 8 million. So that really had an unprecedented level of awareness and impact around the world. So IBES is embarking upon a second such global assessment of biodiversity and ecosystem services. It will be produced in 2028. And one of its focus will be to assess progress in the implementation of the framework that the Convention on Biological Diversity is currently implementing, which is called the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the one that was approved by COP15 a couple of years ago. So that's one. It's a big project. It's in the early stages now. There is a call for experts, which is open currently, if you are interested. Then we also have several shorter term, because this global assessment is over 4 years. It involves more than 150 scientists. So for IBES, it's a large project. Then we also have what we call fast-track assessment. So for IBES, fast-track is 2 years. It's still 2 years, but if you want to be transparent, if you want it's lots of rules, and therefore there is a little bit of rigidity in the system, but still. And here we have embarked upon a fast-track assessment related to business and biodiversity. And so the target audience, which is also involved in the assessment, is the business community. Now, you may know, and some are represented here at this event, that the business community is really, and finally perhaps, but embracing the issue of biodiversity, just as it has with climate just a bit later. But there is a lot of new methods to measure the impact of different types of sectors of the economy on biodiversity, and therefore it's really a nice moment for IBES, the scientific community, or the knowledge holders to look at all of this method, to structure this space a little bit, to understand the scientific basis for all of these new indicators. And that is something that the business community has been asking for some time, and so that report will come out next year. And then one more, in addition to this, there is also another report which is also in preparation, also to serve the needs of those who are implementing the Global Biodiversity Framework. It's an assessment on monitoring capacity. And if you've been following perhaps previous plans for biodiversity, one of the reasons that things did not go all that well with biodiversity is that there are many countries who do not have yet the capacity to monitor their biodiversity. Quite often they rely, and thank God for those, on international organizations to find out what biodiversity is in their own country. And so this assessment is going to look at all of the gaps and the needs in terms of investment, both for data, but also for instrument, for models and other methods. And so that is something that is long overdue, really. And so I'm happy that the IBES plenary decided to do so, because I think it's going to have quite an impact on how the community at large around the world can observe biodiversity. Climate has global climate observing system with satellites, with in situ stations around the world. And for biodiversity, it's very spotty, it's very fragmented, using different protocols, difficult to aggregate, etc. There are lots of questions that are still open for biodiversity. It's really a work in progress, and so it's going, I think, to be an exciting project. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Anne, so much. So, Matilda, would you like to add to this question?
Yes, actually, I'm not sure in the room how many people know about the place that I come from, which is Singapore. But it's a little island in Southeast Asia. And one thing that I will say about Singapore that our very famous former Prime Minister, the late Lee Kuan Yew, used to say is that when we are obsessed about something, you know, we're really very obsessed. Example, case in point, when it comes to water and water security, cleanliness of water supply, fresh water I'm talking about, our late Prime Minister actually said every other policy has to bend the knee at water survival. And this is again where what we're doing at Ocean Purpose Project is saying all of the things that we did as Singapore from the 70s until today around fresh water, what we are trying to do with seawater is exactly the same. To give you some idea in terms of what the grand plan and the big vision is, I'm very particular as an NGO, but also as a social enterprise. Now, we are not a charity. We're a social enterprise purely because of the way that we want to engage with industry and the way that we want to talk about technologies as well as commercialization to be fundamental to the ocean conservation work that we're doing. Is moving beyond the talk into scalable data-driven solutions and figuring out how we can actually turn that pollution into solutions that are economic opportunities for the region that I'm from in Southeast Asia. I'll give you some context. The ocean is facing 20 billion tons of waste per year. You have your plastic pollution accelerating at 460 million metric tons annually. Dead zones, ocean dead zones are quadrupling since the 1950s. Now, we are very good at being able to map all of the issues, the problems, but the key is that communities that live and depend around our oceans, 2 billion to be exact, those communities and the problems they are facing and all of these discussions, there's a gap. The point here is how do we bring these things together and also showcase as an NGO how we are able to fail fast, but also be able to present opportunities and challenges mapped out that can then lead to different steps towards success. Example, we have multiple projects that we work on with Ocean Purpose Project. I'm talking about 3 for today. The first around plastic to fuel. Now, plastic to fuel is riddled with a lot of bad press, issues and challenges, and of course, projects that have been a complete grand failure. The goal that we are working on, so in the past 4 or 5 years, we've collected, maybe not so much, about 11,000 kilograms of mixed plastic waste. And of course, if you compare with the other NGOs who are collecting millions and millions of plastics, I mean, we don't compare, right? But what we have done is to ensure that all of that is turned into different types of low sulfur fuels, as well as hydrogen, as well as the gases produced, completely captured and being able to be redeployed. And I think this is again where the work that we are doing is about, one, meeting the energy need of my country, which is my country, Singapore, has already articulated that hydrogen will be the fuel of the future. Our work to convert ocean plastics that wash onto our shores, as well as the plastic waste that is coming from our own usage into hydrogen, is really about saying, how do we fit this into the wider goal of waste management, of energy creation, and engage industries in a very strategic as well as unique and novel way to figure out what are the industries that can actually come together for us to first get regulatory integration and adoption. Next, for us to also figure out prototyping that then leads to investment and scaling. So this is again where I give you some perspective. If we were able to create our containerized plastic to hydrogen units and then scale that up to, for example, a 20,000 kilogram plastic to hydrogen plant, we could generate 340,000 tons of hydrogen annually. So this is again where it's very important for us to not just think with our blinkers and say, oh, plastic, oh, this is waste issue. You know, there is so much of possibility for us to be able to say, okay, how can we actually pull in multiple industrial stakeholders that help us to move this? Another fact that I will give to you is that based on a University of Oxford study, 97% of hydrogen recovery rate can be gotten from plastic waste. This is not just theoretical. We already have partners in Japan as well as Germany that are able to figure out how to extract that, make it scalable and efficient. So that's one aspect, just dealing with the plastics issue, that is part of our grand plan, starting with our small modular 40-foot container units, and then being able to deploy them in coastal environments, Southeast Asian islands, especially being able to give the poorest of the poor tools for them to be able to say, okay, now we can become hydrogen producers.
Matilda, I'm sorry, we need to wrap up.
There's a lot wrong with the story, but we need to fix, we also need to map that. Sorry, I took a little bit longer.
Yeah, we just need to wrap up. I'm sorry, because we would like to give the participants the chance also to ask you questions and comment.
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much for your input. Okay, so now the floor is open. We can take up to 2 to 3 questions. Okay, or yeah, okay, I saw you first. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. I have 2 questions, but maybe if you don't have time, well, it's okay, you can choose the one you want. Maybe one more for Lydia. So thank you very much, but I would like to come back to the title of a presentation, the value of scientific discourse. How to maintain the value of scientific discourse as a discourse of facts and not opinion, into a time where the conservative counter-revolution is fighting to allow freedom of speech in a way to dilute facts in opinion? And first question. And second one, maybe more for Matilda, about getting people to act. Is the solution about bringing science and facts to citizens? Because we see now that in neuroscience is saying that, showing that understanding is not really a prerequisite to act. And being personally very much involved into spreading facts with the NGO Climate Risk, we see that we need to put people in action to generate action, rather than explaining and trying to reach emotions. Thank you.
I can give a short answer, maybe for that section. I'll be honest with you, the biggest problem that we have in this region, everybody knows what the problem is. They've seen it, they've been marketed to, marketed at. They can quote me the numbers, but the spirit to take action, whether that's on an individual level, to also join in beach cleanups and keep communities clean, prevent waste, plastic waste or other forms of waste going into Southeast Asian river systems and seas. That action is sorely missing, even from the people that are facing, that are living on the coast and seeing, you know, like these waves and waves of pollution coming at them. To be honest, myself, why am I on this journey is because I was personally affected. And I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. This is again where too much of information is leading towards apathy. And I think one of the key ways is really bringing back the conversation towards data science and using scientific principles in terms of prototyping and experiments to be able to get people to start decoupling the feelings and emotions that they are having with this feeling of, I'm just one person, how can I take action? And I've literally, this is phrases I heard from 40 students just yesterday. Within 2 hours of using science, data, industrial and technical knowledge, we were able to change them from, okay, I heard it all before, I don't really care, but what can I do? Towards, this part about, monomers. How do we dive deeper into this issue of understanding monomers? They started to ask questions. And I think what's really missing in this conversation is science potential to ignite the curiosity, to then go on the journey towards action. And that's really something that, with our work, we are very particular that when we work with community or with students or, with even people from my town, I don't want to just do beach cleanup and then we take some photo post on LinkedIn like, wow, we did such great work. I'm so particular that we actually have to incorporate certain aspects of certain technical aspects into the community engagement so that people start to get addicted to the citizen science aspect of it.
We just have 6 more minutes, so I'll give Lydia the chance to answer.
Sorry,
we had 2 hands up. Yes, I see you. Okay, and yes, please.
Actually, I'm happy with his question. If you can answer his
that's fine.
question authentically.
Okay. Yeah, okay, it's fine. Okay, please. Yeah.
Hi, it was the same question that the first one, but I just wanted to add, because I have a chance to speak right now quickly. I came today to a conference called The Value of Scientific Discourse, and I thank you for today. I had the chance to listen to 5 women, and I just wanted to say long live to the presence of women in science and to a position of responsibility too. Thank you.
So you touched our hearts, because that's one of the things we do in UNESCO. Yes. Clearly make sure that girls and women have the chance to follow a scientific career and a study first and then career. And therefore, we even have a call to reduce the gender gap in STEM, because again we do feel that we need all the intelligentsia, all the commitment, all the smart people to work with us to bring science to development. Therefore, we need girls and women. And we just celebrate the 10th anniversary of the International Year for Girls and Women in Science, and we were hoping to get better data. Unfortunately, we see that we are kind of stuck, and that's why UNESCO last year launched this call for action to close the gender gap in science. But going back to this very important question between what are science facts and what are science opinions and what is the misinformation and disinformation related to scientific facts, because as any facts you can alter and manipulate. What do they mean? One of the work, for example, that we are doing very, very important for us is what we call fact-checking in environmental sciences, for example, because we do feel that the growing misinformation, disinformation, fake news on what science is saying about climate change, about the changes in the water cycle, and etc., are very detrimental to decision-making processes and also to the trust in science, because it's quite interesting that studies has shown that scientists as persons, they are very trusted by society. But when it comes to scientific institutions, you see a drop of that trust in terms of societal perception. And part of it, I believe, it's because of all these movements that bring disinformation and distort scientific facts, that create a little bit of an uncertainty also, what science is really saying and what is science not knowing. Because that's another part that I think is quite important, is that it's not that you know everything about everything. Science is a continuous process, scientific process, that as a new challenge, as a new hypothesis comes about, things may be very different, in a few years after different research. So one of the things, plus the fact-checking in important areas of science communication and scientific facts that are important to humanity as a whole, as it is on climate change science, we also have a program under the decade, and I think Matilda mentioned a little bit about that. How do you change your education systems so that you really allow people not to lose their curiosity? That is something we are born with. But also, how do you give the space for people to critically think? To think critically and to use systemic approaches to the way they interpret the world. Because in many cases, our education systems, they don't give this to the people. So if you don't understand, if you can't interpret your own reality and the world you live in using scientific facts, how can you believe on them? So the trust in science is also about creating this scientific, if you want, capacity to see and interpret the world you live in. And I think in that respect, it's a huge challenge. It's something big in our view, because it's about all societies. How do you create a scientific culture in our societies? Because if you don't use scientific facts to really understand what's happening, you're also not going to use that to solve the real problems you face. So it starts, if you want, in a much younger phase. So in one hand, very quickly and responding to needs that are now, is these fact-checking platforms. But at the same time, in the much longer process, how do you transform education so that you really promote not only science literacy, but really a culture of science? And finally, the third one is also about the science systems. How do you develop your scientific questions? How do you set your own program? And how do you involve the stakeholders that finally will benefit from what you are bringing in? And I think this idea of participation, inclusion, open science becomes also something that you can trust more, because you are also part of it. So there are several layers to it. It's not an easy issue, and we saw it during COVID. We see it when we talk about the impacts of climate change, etc. But it's really also something that is not one shot and is done. It's really a continuous investment in fact-checking platforms, in involvement of citizens, in research, and in transforming education. And that's very much a UNESCO agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Lydia. So Anne would like to add a few comments here.
very quickly because we have run out of time, but I wanted, of course, more education, more science. I also wanted to underline the role that the public has to play in really bringing more forward science, facts against opinions. Science is not a matter of opinion, obviously. And for that, the IPCC reports and the EBES reports are to inform government, stakeholders, but really the public at large. And they are here to empower people to really become much more knowledgeable. And so it's also really up to people to become more curious about science, to become more informed, and to really organize a form of resistance against all of the fake news that are out there, because the scientific community by itself is certainly not going to be able to win that battle.
Thank you so much, our speakers. And I would just like to wrap up and maybe highlight some of the very important key messages that were delivered today. There are so many, but I will try to reiterate a few. So first, the importance of education of communities and citizen science, the importance of integrating the local and indigenous communities, the importance of protecting our oceans and the danger that we can face from water pollution, how critical it is to discuss with policymakers to make the decisions science-informed decisions. For the actions, also how the International Decade of Sciences for Sustainable Development, the International Year of Glacial and Open Science Recommendation, Biosphere Reserves, geoparks, they're all tools to involve the community so that they're not just aware, but they can also contribute. How bringing science, public policymakers, and scientists together is very important. How important it is to reflect on how we do science today, and all of us should benefit from the science and contribute to it. The importance of involving the business community, encouraging them to embrace biodiversity and our problems and challenges, critical challenges. Engaging with industry and employing technology and commercialization for protection of the ocean. The importance of fact-checking in science to fight lack of trust in science. And how changing education systems is important to give space for people to think critically. So thank you so much, and I enjoyed a lot this session. Thank you so much, and wish you all a great day. Thank you.